Greetings to all the fellow citizens, the kingdom fellow citizens, and to all the inhabitants of the world. I am happy to be there for that teaching of today, and I wish you to find out your real purpose and to change the world around you. Thanks to MBNK News TV by the power of the King for the kingdom. Please, wherever you are, whatever you are doing, do not hesitate to let me know from where you are listening us from in the comment box. Let me tell you who I am. My name is Gabriel Ambala, an ambassador of the kingdom of God on earth. And as you can see, I am here at the Mamlakat Broadcast Network Central Africa Studio at Yaoundé, Cameroon. I am really proud to be used with all my colleagues of MBN to talk about the kingdom of God every day. Let me tell you something more about MBNK News TV. MBNK News TV is the acronym of that channel, our channel, your channel, as you can see at the top of this live. What we want is to give you everyday and useful and true content about the main topic of the kingdom of God. We want to tell you more about habits, culture, governance, actions of the kingdom of God, because all the truth about the kingdom is because of us. So MBNK News TV is the channel that opposes the facts of the world to the truth of the kingdom. We are the voice of the kingdom of God because our only purpose is the kingdom. Our only message is the kingdom of God, and our mission is to spread the gospel of the kingdom of God. We eat and we drink all the principles of the kingdom of God every day, and we want to share that zeal with you. So share our links because I know that it will certainly help someone in the world. And remember to stay focused, to learn how to save lives and save your own life. Remember that by tagging your friends, family, neighbors, and colleagues who are directly affected by the content of this message, you are actively participating in the spreading of the gospel of the kingdom of God around you. So you are accomplishing a meaning part of the purpose and of your mission for your own existence. Then tag them with an @ sign followed by the person's name if you are on Facebook. Today, we will talk about discipleship, a special way to be recognized by God, a special way to be known by people, and a special way to live as a great man. We will talk about forming Timothy, Titus, Tychicus, Trophimus, and Tychicus. They were under the guidance of Paul during his journey, and that is what that is was at all the time concerning the mission of Paul, the apostle for the kingdom. Today, we will talk deeply about those men. So today, open your heart and may the Lord open your mind and touch your soul. And if you are on Rumble, BitChute, Podbean, remember to share. So let's go. The plan of today to understand the topic is around two big points, two boiling points. Firstly, we want to know who those men were. And for us, it is really important to describe their characters, to describe their person, to describe their personalities. It is really important. It is really important to go to the second boiling point and the last boiling point to know how their discipleship could influence us today. And because we are living today, we need to learn more about all the characters in the Bible to know correctly how to understand the Bible concerning the kingdom of God and how to live concerning the kingdom of God on the basis of the Bible. So, firstly, who were those men? Okay, let us start with Timothy first. He is still Timothy of Ephesus. Its name in Greek is pronounced Timotheus. And among the Greeks, this name means to honor God and sometimes honored by God. It means those two meanings at the same time, to honor God and honored by God. He was an early evangelist and the first leader of the royal community in Ephesus. As he is almost contemporary to us, scientists have discovered that he would have died around the year 1907 after Jesus. Timothy was from the Lycaonian city of Lystra or Derbe in Asia Minor. Timothy's mother was Jewish, and you can understand that culture, that royal culture, to give a, a meaningly name to your children, because that is a big culture in Israel. It is a big culture among Jewish. They know that if you want to determine the future of your child, it is really important for you to give to your child a name with a big signification, with a big meaning. And now you will certainly drive his future to a best future concerning the kingdom. So, as I was saying, the mother of Timothy was Jewish and she believed in the gospel of the kingdom. And the father of Timothy was Greek. His bond with the apostle Paul began when he met him on his second missionary journey, when Paul and Barnabas first visited Lystra. From then on, he became Paul's companion and his missionary partner with Silas. The New Testament indicates that Timothy traveled with the Apostle Paul, who was also his mentor. Keep that word in your mind. We are talking about discipleship. The word mentor is really important because when you are talking about mentor, you are talking about mentees or mentee. So that is really important to know and to understand what is happening concerning the discipleship, maybe the mentorship. It was to him that Paul addressed himself as the addressee of the first and second epistles to Timothy. Because of his knowledge of the scriptures since childhood, in addition to his faith in Paul's teaching, he accepted circumcision. This is mentioned in the book of Acts, chapter 16, verse 1 to 3. Let me read for you. Yet we see him in the case before us, circumcising Timothy with his own hand, and this because of some Jews who were in those quarters. Timothy became Paul's disciple, and after that, later, his constant companion and collaborator in preaching. In year 52, all these years were determined by scientists. So in year 52, Paul and Silas took Timothy with them on their journey to Macedonia. It can be said that this man was zealous and prompt in service. I can say that Timothy had already understood the vain character of all that the of all that the earth could offer. And he understood that at that time for the cause of the kingdom, because of the kingdom. That is why I say every time that the kingdom is the only purpose, the kingdom is the only way. He immediately left his country, he left his home, he left his parents, and he followed at that time Paul to share his mission and obstacles. Timothy was often subject to health problems and frequent illnesses, and Paul encouraged him to use a little wine for the sake of his stomach. When Paul went to Athens, Silas and Timothy stayed in Berea and Thessalonica for a while before joining Paul in Corinth. Timothy next appeared in Acts during Paul's stay in Ephesus between 54 and 57, and in late 56 or early 57, Paul sent him to Macedonia for the purpose of that he eventually arrives in Corinth. Timothy arrived in Corinth just after Paul's letter. Timothy was with Paul in Corinth during the winter from 57 to 58 when Paul sent his letter to the Romans. According to Acts chapter 20, verse 3 to 6, Timothy was with Paul in Macedonia. Just before the Passover in 58, he left the city before Paul, going ahead of him to wait for Paul at Troas. This is the last mention of Timothy in the book of Acts. In the year 64, Paul left Timothy in Ephesus to govern the community, the royal community of Ephesus. The relationship between Timothy and Paul was really close. Timothy's name appears as co-author on 2 Corinthians, Philippians, Colossians, 1 Thessalonians, 2 Thessalonians, and Philemon. Paul wrote to the Philippians about Timothy and said, I have no one like him. No one like him. When Paul was in prison, awaiting martyrdom, he summoned his faithful friend Timothy for a final farewell. I believe Timothy was imprisoned at least once during his services to the cause. In the Bible, no clear mention is made of his death, but in the studies, it is said that he died trying to stop idolatry in a city and was stoned by worshippers. So remember that we have 4 people that we need to talk about today. And right now, we just going to end with Timothy. So let us start with Titus. Titus, that the name in Greek is pronounced Titus, was a missionary and a companion and disciple of the Apostle Paul. He was mentioned in several of Paul's epistles, including the Epistle to Titus. I believe he was a Gentile converted to the cause of the kingdom of God through Paul. You may notice Titus when he brought a fundraising letter from Paul to Corinth to be collected for the poor in Jerusalem in the book of 2 Corinthians. Later, in Crete, Titus appointed priests, elders, if you want, in each city and remained there in his old age, dying in Gortyn near the city of Candia, that is the modern Heraklion. So the Greeks say of him that he studied Greek philosophy and poetry in his early years. So Titus has a trace in the Greek story. And that is really interesting because the Greek story is giving the confirmation that Titus was really alive at that time, after which he served as Paul's secretary and interpreter for the Greeks. In the year 49, Titus accompanied Paul to the meeting of princes held in Jerusalem about the Mosaic rites. Towards the end of the year 56, Paul, while leaving Achaia himself, sent Titus from Ephesus to Corinth by Timothy's delivery of 1 Corinthians, the book, and the Paul's painful visitation, specifically a significant personal offense and challenge Paul's authority by an anonymous individual. During this trip, Titus served as courier for what is commonly called the civil letter, a missive from Paul of which we do not yet find traces, but which is referred to the book in 2 Corinthians. After the success of this mission, Titus traveled north and brought Paul to Macedonia. From Corinth, Paul then sent Titus to organize alms collections for the sons of the kingdom in Jerusalem. So I can easily say that Titus was therefore a troubleshooter, a peacemaker, and an administrator and a missionary. Certainly have held Titus in high esteem. Paul must certainly keep Titus in his heart. Paul summoned Titus from Crete to join him at Nicopolis in Epirus. Later, Titus traveled to Dalmatia. The New Testament does not mention his death, and I've not found any trace of the death of Titus in the Greek story. No, I couldn't find any record where Paul circumcised Titus, but I know that even if he did, it was there that the apostle, delighted with the success of Titus, wrote in the book of 2 Corinthians. Titus then returned to Corinth with a larger entourage, taking 2 Corinthians with him, the book of 2 Corinthians with him. Paul joined Titus in Corinth later. Let us talk about the third one, Trophimus or Trophimus. Let me say Trophimus. Trophimus, whose name is pronounced in Greek Trophimos, was a prince who accompanied Paul, a prince of the kingdom, who accompanied Paul during part of he was with Paul in Jerusalem. And the Jews, thinking that the apostle had brought him into the temple, raised an uproar which resulted in his imprisonment from Paul. Writing to Timothy, the apostle comments that he left Trophimus at Miletus because of illness. This must refer to an unnoticed event in Acts. So, in the book of Acts, verse 4, Trophimus was one of 8 friends who accompanied Paul at the end of his third missionary journey and traveled with him from Greece through Macedonia to Achaia and further by sea to until Jerusalem is reached. Trophimus ended the journey with Paul, for in Acts chapter 21, verse 29, he is mentioned as being with Paul in Jerusalem immediately at the end of this journey. He was the innocent cause of Paul's assault in the temple courts by the Jewish mob, and then his arrest and imprisonment by the Romans. The occasion for this outrage was that the Jews supposed that Paul had brought Greeks also into the temple and defiled this holy place as recorded in the book of Acts, chapter 21, verse 28. The minimum fact that gave rise to this false accusation was that they had seen Paul and Trophimus in the company of each other in the city. On this tenuous basis, they supposed that Paul had brought Trophimus beyond the middle barrier or wall of separation as it is recorded in the book of Ephesians chapter 2 verse 14, beyond which no Gentile was permitted to enter on pain of death. Trophimus is also mentioned in the book of 2 Timothy chapter 4 verse 20, left, and it is written there, I left Trophimus sick at Miletus, as we were saying earlier. This shows that he was again several years after the date given in the previous passages, traveling with Paul on one of the missionary journeys which the apostle undertook after he released his release from his first imprisonment in Rome. And that's all concerning Trophimus. So right now, let us talk about the last one, Tychicus. 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 Tychicus was a prince of the kingdom of Asiatic origin, who, together with Trophimus, accompanied the Apostle Paul on part of his journey from Macedonia to Jerusalem. He is also alluded to having been with Paul in Rome, where the apostle sent him to Ephesus, probably for the purpose of building up and encouraging the church there. In the New Testament, he is mentioned in 5 times, firstly in Acts chapter 20, verse 4, secondly in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 21 to 22, thirdly in Colossians chapter 4, verse 7, fourthly in Titus chapter 3, verse 12, and at the end in the book of 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 12. So, concerning the text of Acts chapter 20, verse 4, that text states that Tychicus originated in the Roman province of Asia, as we were previously saying, and the Western text indicates that he was an Ephesus. Consequently, the text of Ephesians chapter 6, verse 21 say that Paul calls Tychicus a dear brother and faithful servant in the Lord. Dear brother and faithful servant in the Lord. While in Colossians, he says he is a dear brother and faithful minister and a fellow servant in the Lord. Fellow servant in the Lord, faithful minister, dear brother. In Ephesians and Colossians, Paul indicates that he sends Tychicus to the princes to whom he writes in order to encourage them. The passages of the epistle to Titus, where it is Titus chapter 3, verse 12, and Timothy show that Tychicus was again with Paul after the appeal to the emperor had enabled the apostle to regain his freedom. The Titus passage obviously refers to the interval between Paul's first and second Roman imprisonments, and while he was again engaged in missionary journeys. The apostle writes to Titus, who was in Crete in charge of the churches there, that he intended to send him Artemas and Tychicus, Artemas or Tychicus, to take charge of the gospel work in that island in order that Titus may be free and may come and join him in Nicopolis. The last passage where Tychicus is mentioned occurs in the second book of Timothy, which was written in Rome, not long before Paul's execution. To the very end, Paul was busy as ever in the work of the gospel and thought it would have been a comfort to him to have his friends beside him. Yet the interests of the kingdom of God are uppermost in his thoughts, and he sends these friends to help the progress of the work. To the last, Tychicus was serviceable as ever. Tychicus I sent to Ephesus. Second book of two, second books of Timothy, chapter 4, verse 12. As Timothy was in charge of the church in Ephesus, in the book of 1 Timothy, verse 1, chapter 1, verse 3, the coming of Tychicus would set him free, so as to enable him to set off at once to rejoin Paul at Rome, as the apostle desired him. The two last books where we are seeing Tychicus are in second book of Timothy, chapter 4, two last verse, second books of Timothy, chapter 4, verse 9, and second book of Timothy, chapter 4, verse 21. So that is the end of the first boiling point concerning that teaching. So let us introduce here the second boiling point, how their discipleship could influence us today. The most important thing to learn about those men is their devotion, their faithfulness. Since the beginning, they wanted to follow Paul, a great man in front of the Lord, really great. They wanted to walk on his traces. They wanted to replicate his zeal and to participate at the accomplishment of the mission of Paul. They seen behind him a great favor for the kingdom, and they were sometimes together to live it. Sometimes they were in a trip, each of them with Paul, to reach the preaching of the kingdom around Jerusalem. I were really touched by the attitude of Paul. He was ready to live badly and to be put in jail because he loved his mentees. To be a disciple is to be a mentee, ready to learn from the mentor. The mentor is always ready to protect his mentees wherever in the world. And God permitted the meeting between those mentees and this mentor. And thanks God. So, if you are a mentee, the path is not easy at all in the kingdom. You have to learn because your mentor is echoing the influence since the Most High teacher who taught his, his own mentor and who taught his own mentor. Sorry, he is echoing the Most High teacher who taught the mentor who taught his own mentor, and so on. And the discipleship is not an affair of joke. It's not an affair of joke. It is a matter of faithfulness. So sometimes it will not be easy, but take care of yourself and be always sure that the kingdom is with you if you do your best to be faithful. Remember, that is really important. And here is the end of that second boiling point and the teaching of today. Today we have heard the topic on the disciples of the great man. Paul was certainly a great man, and those who followed him to his disciples be rewarded by the statute of companion, co-author, manager of community of princes. So all these lessons were big and important. Which kind of disciple more and more? If not enough, be faithful and remember that the way is for all those who persevere. For my own, I am the mentee of a great woman, and I have too much to learn and to do to be worthy of her kingdom life culture. To be a disciple is not to be a follower, it's to be a learner of how to live like your mentor and be more than him, like King Jesus said previously for each of us. So, thank you so much for being connected during this live and this series. Do you already follow us on our platforms? If you are on YouTube, thank you for putting a blue thumb and to activate the bell to receive all our news. If you discover our stream on Facebook, then subscribe and like our page. Leave us a tweet on Twitter, a message on Instagram. Also find our podcast on Podbean and our videos on Rumble and BitChute. So share our content and invite your friends to our page. You can tag them in the comment box to invite them further if possible. Remember to stay focused in every moment of this life because it is really important, because you must save your life and you must save all those who are around you. And let us see ourselves at the top where eagles are living and where eagles are flying. Bye bye.